Deep in the swamps of Florida, many scary creatures, some dangerous, lurk in the muck and marsh. From alligators, moccasins, alligator snapping turtles, bear, the invasive pythons, even deadly microscopic organisms. But a modern day folk story talks of another creature. They call it the skunk ape, a large bipedal animal that's too elusive for science to find, but many, with trustworthy witness accounts, claim Florida's version of Bigfoot is real. This is a study of strange. Welcome back to the show. I'm Michael, and today joining me on this quest, I'll call it, for strangeness is filmmaker Anthony Cousins. Hey, Anthony, how you doing?
Hey, what's up? Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you for being on. So Anthony you're traveling. He's in Denver. He's on the phone. So the sound is going to be a little weird, but I like it because it fits the style of the stories we're going to be talking about with the skunk ape today. Anthony, you directed a film called Frogman, which is a found footage movie dealing with I'll just call it a cryptozoological creature. And that's why I thought you'd be great to have on as we talk about the Florida skunk ape, which for those that don't know, the skunk ape is like the southeastern version of Bigfoot. It's a bipedal cryptid that inhabits the swamps and forests of southeastern United States, particularly Florida. A lot of the early accounts described the skunk ape as being 6 to 8 feet tall, which is a little shorter than the Bigfoot stories you hear. But nowadays, there's reports of it being gigantic. But Anthony, let me start with you and Frogman here. First, can you tell us a little bit about the movie? And then second, I also want to know if you've just have a general interest in creatures like this, or if it was just a cool movie that you wanted to make.
Yeah, I definitely I've had an interest in creatures, cryptids for a very long time, and kind of a separate interest in frogs, more of an obsession, I'd say. And so yeah, they kind of intersected when I learned about the Frogman, who, there's cryptids that are like, well, this might be a undiscovered creature, that's maybe like stood the test of time or something, hiding out from humanity. But the thing about Frogman is he has a wand, so I think he kind of is more of the extraterrestrial, or maybe what's the word, extra dimensional or
Yes,
interdimensional,
yeah,
uh,
interdimensional, yeah.
yeah, type creature, because that ain't natural. I mean, maybe it's natural. Magic's natural. Magic's real. But the fact that he's got a wand, he's not just a frog hopping around the woods eating flies. So yeah, I I became obsessed with him when I learned about him. And it kind of spiraled from there. I honestly couldn't tell you when it became a reality that was like, this is a good idea. We should make a movie about this. You're just kind of like all of a sudden in the middle of it. You're already doing it. And it's like, how did we get here? I remember learning about it. I remember thinking it was funny.
Yeah.
And now we're making a movie. Oh my God.
So okay, so now I'm like even more interested than I even thought I was. I thought the Frogman, you guys just came up with it as filmmakers. The Frogman is a real cryptozoological sort of theory or whatever you call those things. Like people believe in the Frogman.
Yeah. He's like the Loveland, Ohio Bigfoot, if you will, or Skunk Ape.
Nice,
Yeah, so
nice.
first sightings were in 1955, which
Hmm.
that whole area, like kind of southern Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, is kind of a hotbed for cryptids and creatures and UFO sightings and Men in Black and stuff. I'm going down an insane rabbit hole right now, where I think I'm just kind of prepping myself for being abducted in preparation for this sequel that we're doing. Um, but yeah, I mean, 10 years before even the Mothman was seen down the street in Point Pleasant, there was the Frogman. And I thought he didn't get enough love.
So you broke up for just a second. You said 10 years before the Mothman in Point Pleasant is when the Frogman was first sighted.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's really awesome. And so the movie it's found footage. And where can people see it?
So you can if you subscribe to Screenbox, you can watch it on
Hmm.
Screenbox. Otherwise, you can rent it on VOD anywhere. Um, or if you want bonus features and you're into physical media, we're in Walmart right now, which is insane. This movie that we shot for nothing on a high 8 camera is on a Blu-ray in Walmart. It's I still don't fully understand it or believe it, but
Nice, nice. No, that's fantastic. I'm very excited for all of you that have been involved with that. I'm a big fan of just people making stuff, no matter what the limitations are of movies. And you guys did a great job with it. I love the posters, by the way. I do want to pick your brain about the posters for my own sort of selfish reasons.
oh yeah.
So I'll talk to you about that offline here. But yeah, you guys did a fantastic job, and everybody should check it out. So now, without further ado, Anthony, I'm going to dive into some Skunk Ape stuff. Let me ask you first: do you know much about the Skunk Ape?
I wouldn't say much. Certainly not as much as I know about other cryptids, but I am aware of him, and I am always appreciative of any Bigfoot variants out there that kind of mix things up.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so funny because I love cryptids and I love these stories, but in terms of all the strange things I cover on my podcast and I'm just generally interested in, I know less about cryptids than anything else. Like I dive down weird rabbit holes of like murders and missing people and strange things, but cryptids I don't read as much about, which is so weird because I love cryptid stories. So I was excited just to research this a little bit because I don't know a lot about skunk ape either. And I did want to pick it because I wanted to do a cryptid story, and I'm from Florida originally. So I have an interest in this, particularly some of the early sightings of skunk ape are from the county I'm from.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so it gives me a little bit, of not firsthand experience, but just understanding, the world there a little bit. So yeah, let me dive into some background and give everybody some historical context, I'll call it, to the skunk ape. So, the story you often hear is that the first recorded mentions of a creature resembling the skunk ape in Florida date back to the early 19th century. Native American tribes, particularly the Seminole, spoke of a large hairy creature they called the Esti Kapkaki, or the tall man or big hairy man. These early descriptions align closely with what we would later become known as the skunk ape, though interpretations vary widely. As European settlers began to encroach on these lands, they too reported sightings of large bipedal creatures, and according to the 2007 book Florida's Unexpected Wildlife by Michael Newton, in 1818, a report from Apalachicola, Florida, described a wild man or man sized monkeys roaming the swamps, coming into town, stealing food, raiding stores, just having a good old time. And these early accounts were often dismissed as ravings of like backwoodsmen, frontiersmen, what we'd probably call rednecks today. Yet they did lay the groundwork for the skunk ape legend. And according to the site Eastern Sierra Now, in the 1940s in Suwannee County, east of Tallahassee, a man said an ape, a giant ape man, pulled what I'm going to call a Marty McFly and jumped onto the side of a car and basically took it for a ride until it jumped off 3 miles later. I love that it's 3 miles later because who would drive a car with a giant creature on it for 3 miles? I guess you don't know what you would do in that situation until you're doing it, but
I mean, if
just
you
seems
seem
kind of
cool,
odd.
I'd let him keep hanging on.
Yeah,
I'd
just
encourage
hanging.
them to get on top and go from Marty McFly to Teen Wolf and
Teen
like
Wolf,
surf the
yeah.
car.
Absolutely. God, that would be amazing. So, the problem with these early reports is they're not always truthful, quote unquote truthful. As an example, I can't confirm the term SD Kapkaki, that it's actually a real Native American term. And the reason I say that is I haven't been able to confirm it, but I'm also doing research on Champy, the like Loch Ness monster of North America.
Hmm.
And there's Native American terms for champ, but they're actually not Native American. Like they're made up in stories because if you actually ask those tribes, they're like, that's not a term. That's not part of our
Uh,
language. It's totally made up. So I haven't been able to figure out if SD Kapkaki is like that or not. But it could be. It also, maybe it is real. I haven't been able to figure that out yet.
this
So
seems to
from
be like a running thing with cryptids that there's like these assumptions that they're based in like indigenous history, and then I don't know that kind of runs away into its own mythology on.
Absolutely, and that's the kind of stuff I love, Anthony. I love finding where these stories come from, and I don't mean to say that in like the skunk ape is real or not real. I just love sourcing through the history of how we come to the beliefs that we have, and that is part of the mythology of these things, whether real or not. So I can't gauge, besides their weird sort of random articles about wild men sightings. I actually think the first skunk ape sighting that we tie to the current image of the creature is in fact from August of 1971, and this is when an Associated Press article released a story that then was syndicated around the country. And it's a report of a man named H.C. Osborne, described as an engineer and an amateur archaeologist. This was, in fact, Henry Clay Osborne, who went by Buzz, according to his obituary. And he and four friends were digging in these Native American mounds, which are in sort of southwestern Florida area, and they were looking for relics in Big Cypress Swamp in south of Florida. And essentially, what the article says is that, oh well, here, and I'll read some of the quotes of what H.C. Osborne said. So he said he had been digging around looking for artifacts. They camped for the night, and then it was 3 in the morning when we heard something moving around outside the tent. We went out, and there it was, standing there looking at us while we stared at it. It didn't stay very long and ran before we could recover from our surprise. We found its tracks the next morning. They are very manlike. I have plaster casts we made from them. The thing we saw that night had a foot 17 and a half inches long and 11 and a half inches across at the toes. In later trips, we found smaller tracks indicating there are at least three of them in that section of the swamp. So, yeah, that's the first kind of official skunk ape sighting. Have you ever spent time in like swamps of Florida or Georgia or Mississippi or anything?
I have, yeah. I did like a, what do you call it, like a fan boat tour. Is that what they're
Yeah,
called?
yeah,
Fan
yeah.
boats?
Airboats.
Airboats, yeah. Man, it's gorgeous and very very mysterious.
It definitely is.
I would
Yeah,
not be surprised if there was all sorts of weird stuff hiding out in there. Although in Florida, I love this side of Florida. You've got like the Tiger King type people. You know, maybe the skunk ape is just a gorilla that someone had as a pet they shouldn't have
yeah.
had and got loose and
You
not
know,
used to dealing with swamps, so it just got real
yeah.
stinky.
It's funny you say that. I'm going to jump ahead in my story, Anthony, because one of the most famous, and I know this is sort of out of chronological order, which is how I was doing this, but one of the most famous pictures of an alleged skunk ape came from 2000. They call it the Miyaka skunk ape photos. You may have even seen these before. And it came from an anonymous photo, or the photos and a letter were sent anonymously to the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department. And I'm going to read you the letter that came with these photos because it's really interesting and it does kind of hint upon this like an escaped gorilla idea. So it says, "Please, sir or madam, enclosed, please find some pictures I took in late September. My husband says he thinks it's an orangutan. If someone missing an orangutan, I don't see it. I didn't see it when I first took the picture because it was so dark. As soon as the flash went off for the second time, it stood up and started to move. I then heard the orangutan walk off into the bushes. From where I was standing, I judge it to be 6.5 to 7 feet tall. As soon as I realized how close it was, I got back into the house. It had an awful smell that lasted well after it had left my yard. I'm a senior citizen, and if this animal had come out of the hedge and came after me, if there wasn't anything I could have done about it. I'm concerned because my grandchildren like to come down and explore in my backyard. An animal this big could hurt somebody seriously. For 2 nights prior, it had been taking apples that my daughter brought down from up north off our back porch. These pictures were taken on the third night. Please find out where this animal came from and who it belongs to. It shouldn't be loose." And I'm kind of skipping around because it's a long letter, but I will say at the end it just says, "God bless. I would prefer to remain anonymous." Um, but yeah, it's amazing. If you weren't on the phone, I'd send you a link to see the pictures, Anthony. But I'll kind of describe it here for listeners. It's obviously a picture taken at night because it has a big flash, and it does kind of look like an orangutan or a giant gorilla that has a big gray beard. Its teeth are kind of snarling, and its eyes are glowing red in the reflection of the flash. I will say people that don't believe this, which I don't particularly believe this photo. It's kind of like sent under strange circumstances that makes me think it could be a hoax. But apparently, humans, apes, sort of primates like us, whatever it is in eyes that make them reflect, apes don't have that because they don't see well in the darkness like cats and stuff where their eyes glow in the dark. So people talk about the reflection of the photo not being realistic to a primate's eyes and that it looks more like plastic, which I kind of think it looks like plastic to me. But you tell me. I'll put some links in the show notes for everybody. So listeners, if you're curious to see it, please click on that and go look at them. It is kind of a fascinating photo, and it is kind of spooky as well. And who am I to say it's not real? I'm just saying what I think. I could very well be wrong, and it could be a real thing.
I'm pretty
Um,
sure I have seen this photo. It's pretty
yeah,
great. It definitely just looks kind of like an ape, not something, other, like a undiscovered species necessarily. But again, I feel like you take any sort of primate and put it in the swamps of Florida, it's gonna smell nasty. It doesn't know how to deal with
yeah,
that.
yeah. And for people that don't know, so in Florida, in the swamps, in any honestly any sort of lake, it's the bottom of these lakes. It's where all the material, all the leaves, all the grass, and everything sort of corrodes, and I don't know the right term, but it becomes what we call muck, and it's just thick layer of green sediment that smells like pure shit. Like it's the smelliest stuff in the world. And I grew up fishing a lot, so I'd go out and walk around in lakes and swamps, and it gets on your shoes, it gets in your feet, it gets on your clothes. It definitely stinks. So the idea that this creature is in Florida, it's smelling bad is very real. It definitely would stink terribly, terribly bad. So I'm going to backtrack now because I just wanted to talk about that because the orangutan tie-in. But in the after that initial 1971 article, tons of articles started to be published talking about sightings and anecdotes about the skunk ape. This is also when the term skunk ape came around, was in the early 70s, and it really caught on. And I do think it's worth mentioning that because of the Patterson Gimlin film before that, because of just the nature of like pop culture at the time, there was a large interest in cryptozoology in the 70s. So these kind of stories really caught on in the media, and more people are talking about seeing the skunk ape. The stories are getting published more, they're getting spread around. And that's where it's kind of hard to actually figure out what are real sightings, what are fake sightings. And I'm sure there's a nice blend of both during this time period. But one of the most important sightings that ever happened was in 1973 when a 10-year-old David Shealy said he saw a skunk ape with his brother. It was in some tall sawgrass, and Shealy said it looked like a man but covered in hair. And the reason this is an important sighting is because David Shealy now operates the Skunk Ape Research Center in Ochopee, Florida. He's the main dude hunting skunk apes down, keeping track of sightings, finding hair, taking plaster cast of footprints, all that kind of stuff. He has a documentary that is on YouTube. I watched it. And he is a little bit like, Tiger King. He's got a little bit of that, but a little more down to earth, but there's definitely like some fun character stuff with David Shealy. And he's also associated with one of the most famous videos of the skunk ape ever taken, and that is in 2000, on July 8th, 2000, at 7:19 PM at Big Cypress National Preserve in the Everglades. Dave caught something on video camera, a skunk ape, perhaps. You can be the judge. I'll share a link to this video in the description for the show notes for those that wanna see it, but to describe it, it's a very shaky image, probably shot on high 8 like Frogman movie itself, and you see this hairy or dark figure running through this tall sawgrass in the distance. People that believe the video say that you can't run through that kind of swampy ground and sawgrass very easily, so it couldn't have been a human in a costume. I will point out, as someone that likes to be skeptical of these things, that it's not running in the whole video. The video actually does last a while, and in the first part of it, it's just kind of trudging along, looking kind of awkward. And then at a certain moment, it does start running. So it could have found better ground to run on if it was a person. It to me, it's a little too shaky. It's a little too hard to really tell what it is. But Dave Shealy says it's a skunk ape. It's definitely human size, which could be skunk ape, could be human. and you should check it out. It's not as interesting to me as a Patterson Gimlin film. I think that's way more interesting, especially because it's shot on film, so it has that like tonality to it that's so cool. Um, but that is the famous video of the skunk ape. Do you think you've seen this,
I
Anthony?
don't know if I have seen that. I'm excited to look it up.
Yeah, it's worth a watch. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Again, it literally might have been shot on high eight, so I'd be curious if you're like, oh, hey, that looks like our movie.
I mean,
That'd
the
be really
thing is,
cool.
these the proof of these cryptids, whether they're a hoax or not, I kind of just respect the hell out of them for just giving us some modern mythology, you know. But I think the interesting thing is how, like for someone to dedicate their life to it the way this guy does, or for someone to give an anonymous story, like that's something I've learned in my research is very often the people that have these firsthand accounts almost don't want to share them or are reluctant to share them or want to remain anonymous. And I'm like, what do they have to gain from that? It kind of gives it more, I don't know, legitimacy for me.
Yeah, and look, I honestly believe David Shealy specifically saw something when he was a kid because he's devoted his life to this. Like he's found, and I don't think he was like, "Oh, I'm going to get rich on this thing. I can create a business and make up these stories." I don't think he's a rich guy. I mean, I could be wrong. I think he's doing this because he's so interested and wants to figure out the truth of what he saw and what he
Mm,
witnessed. That's my personal belief about him, and that to me gives him some credibility as well. And I do think if he was fraudulent himself, I kind of think he may have pushed he may push the envelope too far and like release more videos, but he hasn't. Like it's just
hmm
that one video. There's some other photos he's taken, but like back in the 90s. So it's a really interesting thing. And you were talking earlier about how beautiful the swamps were when you went on that airboat ride. The Everglades specifically is huge.
hmm
It's much bigger than people realize. Like it's like the whole south sort of central and southwestern part of the state of Florida, and even outside of the national park, that swampland still continues on and grow, and it sort of goes into this area known as like Thousand Islands down towards the coast and stuff. And to me, if there was a creature in the country that hasn't been discovered yet, I definitely think it could be in that area. um, is it a large primate? I don't know, but I definitely think there could be creatures in those areas. And like you said, the modern mythology of this too, that is really cool that we have folklore that is modern folklore that's developed in these areas. And I also I take more opportunity to believe the skunk ape because of where it's potentially located than other Bigfoot sightings. Because I know there's been so many Bigfoot shows and stuff that I've watched because I love that stuff. And it's like, oh, here we are, and right outside of New York City where there's a Bigfoot. And it's like, no, there isn't. No, it's like you're not going to see it there. Um, but yeah, I do think that area of Florida could be home to some creatures we don't know about yet. So
Sure.
yeah,
And even, even if it is just some sort of primate that we already do know about that's just somewhere they don't belong, if a few of them got out or were released intentionally at the same time, they're going to keep, they could probably have offspring and survive there for a while, which
yeah,
is
yeah,
awesome to think of orangutans like battling alligators or something. Like,
yeah.
I'd watch that movie.
Oh, orangutans battling alligators. That would be amazing. I was thinking to myself earlier because I didn't mention, but some of the first accounts that came out in like the 70s when all these sort of swath of sightings were seen, a lot of them came from Polk County, which is where I'm from. And there was one gentleman that said he saw this ape-like creature run and grab corn and then like run off into the woods with it. Which honestly, like, look, they probably eat corn, so it kind of makes sense. But I was thinking to myself, like, I'm from that area of the country. I grew up fishing. I grew up going to farms. My dad grew oranges, so I used to go out to orange groves and the wilderness all the time. And I've never seen a skunk ape, but I've seen 8 million alligators. I've seen 8 trillion snakes and other strange, sort of dirty creatures. And yeah, my point is that there's a lot of wildlife in these areas. Like there's a lot there to eat. There's a lot there to live off of, and other creatures do as well. So yeah, yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's a gator man also. I'm not sure if
Oh, really?
that's, I think it's Florida or
I think
somewhere
it.
around there,
There's
Louisiana or
yeah,
something.
yeah. Something about that does strike me as vaguely familiar. I'm gonna have to look that up. So it goes without saying, Anthony, the scientific community does not give a lot of credence to the skunk ape's existence, and they want more physical evidence. They want um, yeah, all that sciency stuff is what they want, and I do too, because I am a nature at heart, or excuse me, I am a skeptic at heart, so I want more of that as well. But I definitely don't sort of poo poo it immediately like a lot of other people do that may not believe in it. I do think there could be vestiges of something that's real in this, and you know what, just occurred to me, a lot of the early sightings of like quote unquote wildmen and stuff were shorter, and that to me seems more plausible than a giant 8-foot ape like creature living in the wilderness, just because I think it's going to be easier to survive if something's a bit smaller.
Sure. Well, and,
Yeah.
and and we as humans, we just have a tendency to blow everything out of proportion. Whether it's us
Yes.
trying to just make a story more exciting, or sometimes I think our minds really do it for us. They twist our memories to make it more fantastical than it was.
It's true, and you get that with a lot of these sightings when people report how big something is, and I don't just mean the skunk ape. I mean other creatures as well. People come across something at night or in the woods or on the lake or whatever, and they'll immediately be like, it's 30 feet long and 18 feet high, and blah 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 blah. And it's like, in those moments when your heart is going and adrenaline's pumping, I do think you can misinterpret how big something is, and then you start thinking about it that way, and then your memory sort of changes and sort of grows, and you're also influenced by what you're hearing from other people. And I come across that with other things. I did a UFO story about the first flying saucers, like where we got the term, Kenneth Arnold's sighting of these strange unidentified objects in the 40s. And as soon as a newspaper person termed the coin flying saucer, then every sighting that followed was flying saucers. And that's because it influences people's brain, and they're starting to
Hmm.
see that now when they witness something.
Oh yeah.
And I'll even add to that, in some of my research on the skunk ape, the AP released an article in 1926, and this is before the thought of skunk ape came around, but it talked about Seminole Indians and finding monkey bones that were dug up in Florida, and that it had been confirmed by the Smithsonian Institute that these old primates that don't exist in North America anymore were found in Florida, and along with sort of remains of Seminole Indians. But it was actually corrected with modern researchers that this was a bit of a fake story, because it's not the Smithsonian Institute, it's the Smithsonian Institution, which a real reporter would have gotten right. And there's actually no record with the Smithsonian that they ever found primate bones in Florida. So it was all just kind of made up just to sell newspapers, likely. But because of that article, people started to see monkeys in Florida. So people read it and then they start to see it in their mind. And so if they
Hmm.
witness something strange in the trees, they jump to that conclusion in their mind. Anyway, I lost track of where I was going with that point, but it's all interesting things to
It
me.
is. As I
Yeah.
said, I'm going through like a real deep dive right now in preparation for the continuing Frogman adventures, and I'm reading the Mothman prophecies.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something that's really interesting is like John Keel that wrote that book took it very seriously, and he was a skeptic, but he was like, okay, I'm gonna approach this as like there's something going on here to get to the bottom of, and he would withhold information that he was
Oh.
finding out firsthand accounts to try and avoid that type of thing that you're talking about of like, okay, someone said they saw an ape and now 20 people have seen apes or flying saucers. So I think that's an interesting approach too. It's like withholding.
Yeah. Trying not to influence people. I think that's
Hmm.
why, like cops, they try to question witnesses and things separately, because they don't want the witnesses influencing the memory of other witnesses. So
Totally.
they try to separate people. Yeah, it's a very true thing. The power of suggestion is very powerful. I'm fascinated with it myself, and I think it goes into these reports of cryptids. And now, as the modern day, when we have television shows and documentaries about the Mothman and Bigfoot and Yeti and Skunk Ape and stuff, and these things do influence what people are seeing. Do you believe in the Skunk Ape?
Yeah, I think I do.
Nice,
There's
nice.
not many fantastical things I'll say no to, because I definitely want to believe. But
Yeah, yeah,
you know, I think when people see things like this, they're seeing something, and maybe, as we're talking about, you're misremembering, or your mind is trying to fill gaps, as you're seeing something in the night. But I think this all stems from somewhere legitimate. Someone saw something at some point.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the incredible thing to remember about cryptids, yeah, some of them are really fantastical, frogmans with wands and mothmen, but like there are like a cryptid is a legitimate, like, scientific term for a creature that is, put that potentially exists but hasn't been proven to exist yet. And like we do have creatures that have gone from cryptids to bona fide animals that we know of, like giant squid and things like
Hmm.
that. And even like back before, when we hadn't discovered so much of the world, people were traveling around and say like, "Oh my God, I saw like a giant hairy man," and they're like, "Yeah, you're out of your mind." It's like, well, they went
Yeah,
to a new
yeah.
place they'd never been before and saw a gorilla,
Exactly,
or I
exactly.
saw a horse with a neck that was like 12 feet long. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, saw a giraffe.
Exactly, and the duck-bill platypus, people thought it was fake when they
Yeah,
first like, they thought somebody taxidermied and, like, sewed on a bill onto some creature because 'cause they're like, "There's no way that's real,"
right.
and, yeah, there's some crazy things out there. Yeah, that's great. That gives me a lot to think about. That's a really good perspective and good points to all this. So if I were to dive into some future cryptids just to learn about, maybe not even for the show, but just for my own fun. What do you suggest? I'm already going to start reading about Frogman now, so
Oh yeah.
I'm on that. But what else you got?
There's a really great book called The United States of Cryptids, which just kind of gives a brief summary of practically every cryptid across the United States, like 2 to 3 pages each. That's where I found a lot of fun ones that I dug
Nice,
deeper
nice.
into. I think sheep squatch is particularly interesting.
What? Sheep squatch.
It's like
Wow,
a
wow.
Sasquatch, but with sheep qualities. Or in Washington or Oregon, somewhere around there, there's the bat squatch, which is basically a Sasquatch with wings and a bat face. That's badass.
Nice.
Um, yeah, there's so much, but I think that area that you're already kind of investigating, the southernmost
Yeah.
part of the U.S., has the most interesting stuff going on. And something I just recently learned is like the one place that apparently I haven't dug into enough to say if this is true or not, but that indigenous people weren't uh, like settling in uh, was West Virginia, and it's like, why is that? And that's also like the number one hotspot to this day for like paranormal activity. And
Well, very cool. Well, so Anthony, thank you for taking the time today. I feel like it's sort of a quick story for me, but I definitely wanted to share some thoughts and some things I learned about the skunk ape and learn more from you about cryptids. Tell people, do you have anything else you want to promote or talk about what you're doing? You mentioned you're doing a sequel to Frogman.
yeah, yeah, if you follow at Frogman Movie on Instagram, um, you'll see updates on that. We're hopefully going to shoot in the next few months here, and
Nice.
hopefully get it out next year. And yeah, we're making short films here and there in the meantime. Going to Fantastic Fest tomorrow, which is
Oh,
exciting for
fantastic.
with the new short film. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, good for you. That's going to be fun. I have a lot of friends going to that. I've never been. I need to go to that festival, and I've
oh, it's
never
so
been.
fun. Yeah, you got to come.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you again, Anthony. I'm going to put links to stuff in the show notes about Frogman and the Instagram and anything else that we may share about you. And I really appreciate the time. And when you're back in LA, let me know. I'd love to get together.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you for listening to A Study of Strange. Before you go, take a quick second, hit that subscribe button, and please leave a rating and review on Apple or Spotify. It goes a long way to helping others find the show. If you want to support the show in other ways, you can do that through our Substack, which you'll find on astudyofstrange.com. There's a support tab that'll take you there. That's a great way to get additional content and also get episodes early. That'll do it. Thank you for listening again. Good night.